If you're a last-minute gift shopper, then Instacart is your holiday rescue app this season. No more tracking packages, no more trips to the post office, and no more Christmas gifts arriving in February. Instead, you can just download Instacart to order gifts like beauty, tech, and gourmet goods from local stores and get them delivered in as fast as 1 hour. Plus, right now, you'll get free delivery on your first 3 orders. This offer is valid for a limited time. $10 minimum per order. Additional terms apply. Must be 21 plus to purchase alcohol where available.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, an infant formula company on a mission to get a lot closer to the most superfood on the planet, breast milk. Our patented protein blend has more of the important and most abundant proteins actually found in breast milk. We're the first and only U.S.-made formula to use organic, grass-fed whole milk, not skim. We even conducted the largest clinical trial by a new infant formula company in a quarter century, with clinically proven benefits like easier digestion, less spit up, and softer poops versus a leading infant formula. And we make our own formula in the USA and our very own factories in Iowa, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio. Welcome to a movie film commentary track. My name is Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Sorry. You did wait, Brian.
Huckleberry line, and then I was just like,
Future Academy Award nominee Brian Hall joins
all right, yeah,
me.
we'll keep it. Hey, you know what? We don't always get it on the first take. That's all right.
As long as we finish strong.
Yes.
That's the important thing. And that's very apt because the movie we're talking about today is Tombstone.
Yes.
And this movie was a famous dumpster fire of a production that, we're talking about it 30 years later. So I guess you could say they finished strong.
Yeah, I didn't really know that until I dug into this. So that was kind of fascinating to learn. And I know you are a big student of this movie. So I am really excited to hear all the knowledge you're about to drop.
Well, this is probably, in my top tier of favorite movies, I would say, if not my top 5, certainly my top 10.
Oh, wow.
It's a movie I revisit all the time. And, you and I, we talk often about movies where if it's on TV, you're going to watch the rest of it, no matter where you happen to jump in.
Yep.
For Tombstone, it's if I see it on TV, I'll jump in, see where it's at, and then I'll pull it up on Vudu and start it from the beginning. That's my
yeah.
That's my ritual for Tombstone,
dude. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Well, we'll get into it, but I'm curious about what your feelings are on Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp and that.
Oh, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I got lots to say. So this movie came out on Christmas Day of 1993, and we are recording this just shortly before Christmas Day of 2023. And time moving in a linear fashion means it is the 30th anniversary of this film, which has only grown in estimation, I think, in the decade since it came out. But hey, like Brian said, we got lots to talk about. So what we'll do is we'll give our sponsors a chance to do their thing, and then if anybody listening wants to pull up the movie and watch along with us, they can do that now. So let's take a short break. We'll come back, and we will watch Tombstone.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
And we are back and ready to go. Brian, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so we will hit play on 3 as usual. 1, 2, 3, play. And here we go. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, play.
And I guess we should mention we're watching the theatrical cut, right? Because there is a version out there that has a few extra scenes.
There is an extended cut, although that was only ever released on a DVD special edition in 2003 for the 10th anniversary. And yeah, that has not been made available digitally, and it's not substantially different. There's a few bits and pieces here and there, but I think the theatrical cut works fine.
Yeah, I went on YouTube and watched the scenes and thought they were fine, but yeah, I agree. I think the movie's fine as is.
So this opening here, this is narrated by Robert Mitchum, who obviously a very well-known actor from kind of the golden age, a lot of Westerns, but also he was in the original Cape Fear.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And what's interesting here is that we've got footage from, that right there, we see Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, and that's Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, but we see interspersed footage from The Great Train Robbery, directed by Edwin Porter, which is, one of the first narrative films ever made, a very big deal, which, I teach about it in my history of cinema class. This right there, this is from The Great Train Robbery.
From 1903, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. There's something very cool about seeing this really, really old footage and this narrator. There's that very famous shot, right? We should talk about that.
That's right. Yeah.
The final shot of the Great Train Robbery where someone points a pistol right at camera and fires. And legend has it that people in the audience who weren't used to seeing movies jumped.
Yeah, and that seems unlikely to me that actually happened.
Yeah, or maybe it's like someone was like, "Oh my," and then some reporter was like, "What a scoop," like motion picture, petrifies people, or something. Yeah.
That's good.
But no. So I was just gonna say, I love that narration because he's doing it sort of flat, but like in the best way, where it's like, yep, back in the old West, a whole lot of people died. Like
it's a little Waylon Jennings-esque, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love the sort of just matter of factness with which he says all those things.
Well, and I think it provides a good segue into the opening scene here, where we introduce the cowboys, and worth mentioning, just as a matter of historical fact, this film goes out of its way to be like, oh, the cowboys and their red sashes. Yeah. The cowboys did not wear red sashes. That's just made up for this movie, and I would have to imagine it's like Crips and the Bloods kind of thing,
It's just an easy identifying costume mark, yeah.
But
it helps. It does help.
It does. I think it's a useful narrative tool for the film. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's this movie. It's really interesting because it's obviously it's not a historical document, but it touches on things as they happened. So it's not completely fanciful, but there are several outright digressions from history that as they come up, I'll try to point them out.
That's great. Cause I read a little bit on this, but I'm not very up on my Wyatt Earp history.
Yeah.
It's a brutal opening. You definitely
it
hate
is. It's a great, exactly that, right? It's a perfect way. Boy, you want us to hate your villains?
Yep.
Well, have them kill a brand new groom, have them kill a priest.
Yep.
And
like
not
cackle.
Yeah. And I think
these guys.
That's the thing. I mean, the cowboy gang now, as written, the script was much more expansive. Kevin Jarre, who wrote the script, he was the original director. He wanted something much like, Kurt Russell called it the Western Godfather.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was a script that everybody signed on for. It's obviously not the movie that was made. We'll talk about why, but the cowboy role, specifically the Clantons, their roles were diminished substantially to the point where really we got Curly Bill, played by Powers Booth. We have Johnny Ringo, played by Michael Biehn, and they're the most front and center cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest are kind of like, oh hey, it's Thomas Hayden Church, and oh look, it's John Corbett.
Yeah. And they're real like, get 'em, boss, kind of
That's
variety.
Right.
I mean, it completely works. And but yeah, I could see where there's some defectors later, and I could see where you could really get into that drama a lot more within their own camp.
Yeah, really. In this opening scene, we see Sherman McMasters, played by Michael Rooker. He has a look on his face where he's like not okay with it, and that's essentially the only thing setting up his eventual defection.
Right.
Michael Biehn is fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, and I had just rewatched The Abyss.
That's right.
And he's so good in that. And I was like, Michael Biehn, where's he been?
It's a shame that about 10 years ago, as we record this, a little over that, he suffered a stroke, Michael Biehn.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's the reason he's been kind of, he has not been particularly present in a lot of films. He's now appearing in more stuff. He's overcome the impacts of that, but that's essentially what took him off the board for a few years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to see him in the Avatar films at the very least, right?
Absolutely.
His buddy Cameron.
So this actor who plays the priest, his name is Pedro Armendariz. His dad is the actor who played Kareem Bey in From Russia with Love, James Bond's Turkish ally.
Oh, wow. Man, just looking at this image, I constantly found myself just drinking in this like widescreen, sumptuous, like you've got all these characters in frame and you've got this crazy clouded blue sky, white puffy clouds, mountain vistas. It's just, I just love looking at this movie.
I love too, by the way, that shot that we have of Johnny Ringo as he's positioned in the frame when he talks about "Behold the Pale Rider, Hell followed with him." Yeah. And then later on in the film, when Kurt Russell says that "Hell's coming with me," he's framed exactly the same way in the frame.
Oh, funny! I didn't know.
It's a perfect match. Now, Kurt Russell, we love Kurt Russell. How can you not love Kurt Russell, right? Yeah. Like, this is probably my favorite Kurt Russell performance.
I can totally see that. Yep.
Right. And what's extraordinary is that it's largely a reactive performance by design. In that a lot of it, like this right here, talk about a perfect intro for your hero right here.
Save
you want to hit that horse? I'll hit you. Right.
Yep.
Like the same way we got a perfect intro for the villains right here. We don't need to know anything about his extended backstory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? We allude to it here about, Wyatt Earp from Dodge City, whatever. We don't need it. We know that when he sees somebody hitting a horse, he will F them up.
Yep. Yep.
That's all you need to know.
You back. Yep.
Yeah. That's it, And his first line hurts, don't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Kurt Russell was not the first choice of Kevin Jarre when he was conceiving this idea. His first choice was Kevin Costner.
Gee, I can picture it. He definitely has always been kind of Western guy, and even now with Yellowstone, he's like modern Western guy.
Western guy, exactly. So in the very, very initial goings, they approached Kevin Costner, and he's like, "No, I got my own Wyatt Earp project that I'm working on. You know, that was going to be like a premium TV miniseries." By the way, right here, real quick, we're watching on mute, but I can hear the music. As Morgan and Virgil come into frame, and I've seen this so many times. Whenever that music comes up, I get sad. Because it's this beautiful, it's the Earp family theme.
Yeah.
And then when it's reprised later, it's so much sadder, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so right away
tragedy heading their way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Kevin Costner's like, "No, I got this other thing I'm doing." So then, they went to a couple other people. Richard Gere desperately wanted to be in this. He wanted to play Wyatt Earp. But Kurt Russell was the guy. Kurt Russell was a big Wyatt Earp fan before this movie even came around. And we know this because what's his son's name?
Yeah, Wyatt.
Right? Named for Wyatt Earp. And, he was born in the mid-'80s. So you can see why when everything just went to shit, and we'll talk about why that happened, Kurt Russell was the guy who stepped into the breach to ensure that the movie ended up getting made.
Yeah. Very interesting. It was interesting to me how much he did not want any attention on it. Well, not that he didn't want attention. That's not weird. But just that he didn't even want the credit for it. I find that interesting.
That's right. Yeah. He's like, "I want to get it done, but I don't want to be, the guy with the target on his back, I guess, right?"
Yeah.
Now, worth mentioning, there were two other Earp brothers who went to Tombstone. In addition, yeah. So you had Wyatt, Morgan, and Virgil, but there was an older brother, older than Virgil, who was James Earp, and there was a younger brother, younger than Morgan, named Warren Earp.
Huh.
So there were 5 brothers total, but because in the actual gunfight it was only these 3, the other 2 were left out. Although historically, Warren Earp was part of the Vendetta ride at the end of the film. But that's not depicted, which is weird to me. Like, you know what I mean? That's like that's like if there was a third Hall brother.
Right.
We got Brian Dan. Let's call him Daryl. And they make a movie about Dan Hall, and they include Daryl, but not Brian.
Yeah.
They're like, there was no Brian.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, whatever you accomplished that day or during that time, they're like, "Well, yeah, but we just thought the story was cleaner without you."
Without you. Like, you don't matter.
Right. I think everybody gets it. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm pouring one out for Daryl Hall.
Yeah.
Not the Hall and Oates Daryl Hall. The Hall brothers Daryl Hall.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Now, Val Kilmer, by the way, that's Frank Stallone right there. Who Val Kilmer is, this guy right here, Ed Bailey. Frank Stallone. You can see, you look at him, you can tell that's Sylvester Stallone's brother.
Holy cow. I did not, not that I'm like very familiar with his face, to be honest, but I mean, that's because he's a musician, right?
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
He's musician and Doc Holliday foil. That's his. Right. Now, Val Kilmer, obviously, like when we think of Tombstone, we think of Val Kilmer, we think of Amir Huckleberry. And if there is a definitive Val Kilmer role, it is probably Doc Holliday.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things where, like I said, I haven't seen this movie in a while, but this character, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, comes up so much. It's so beloved and so remembered from this.
I mean, Val Kilmer a couple of years ago released a memoir, and it was called I'm Your Huckleberry.
Yeah.
So he himself recognizes the importance of this, the outsized presence of this character in his filmography. But again, he was not the first choice, and I think this is just sort of interesting. The first choice by the filmmakers was Willem Dafoe. And the thing about that, Brian, is I'm sure, like, I hear that and I'm like, oh, I can picture that.
I can see it. I mean, it's very different, but I can
very different.
See it.
Would it be this? Most definitely not, but I can absolutely see that.
Yeah.
And the journey towards how this movie ended up being what it is, is so much of it is the push and pull between Kevin Jarre's storytelling desires and Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp desire, right? So he's developing his own thing. He gets Lawrence Kasdan on board, at which point what was envisioned as a miniseries becomes a movie.
That's interesting because miniseries weren't the same thing that they are now.
That's right.
Right? I'm just worth noting, right? I mean, if something that was going to be on ABC for like 3 nights would be very different from the type of miniseries we would see today.
That's right. So and I think it would have been probably a premium cable thing, like a HBO something. But HBO probably because the film itself was Warner Brothers. But Lawrence Kasdan gets involved; it becomes a feature. Now, bear in mind, this is the early '90s when Kevin Costner is the cock of the walk.
Sure.
And essentially, he strong arms every studio into not releasing Tombstone.
Okay.
Right. He's got his own thing set up at Warner Brothers, but he tells Universal, "Hey, I'm going to be doing Waterworld for you guys, and that's going to be a huge hit," said Kevin Costner. So Universal stays away. Everybody stays away except for Hollywood Pictures, which had a pre-existing relationship with the producers and whatever, and they had already agreed. Okay, we'll release it. That's what they said. Mm-hmm. Now Hollywood Pictures owned by Disney, right? So now you've got a Christmas release starring Willem Dafoe, he of The Last Temptation of Christ.
Right.
And Disney's like, no, sorry, we can't do that.
Right.
So the producers are like, look, it's Disney or nobody, right? So they're like, fine, who's second on the list? I guess Val Kilmer, they said, throwing their hands in the air, probably, And yet, I mean, that's the funny thing, right? Because arguably Val Kilmer is one of the most iconic characters of that era of film. And Tombstone, no doubt in my mind, Val Kilmer played a role in giving it sort of this word of mouth, which completely swept Wyatt Earp about 6 months later, out of people's consciousness. So Kevin Costner was like the vehicle for his own damnation. He's like a Twilight Zone episode.
So that was not, I honestly don't really remember. I know I've seen it maybe once, but I mean, was it not as well received, or how did that go down, Wyatt Earp?
Oh, it was critically savaged, and
Really?
Financially it tanked, because it cost more than twice what this one cost.
Mm-hmm.
And it made globally what this one made domestically.
Oh, wow.
How
would you compare the two? I mean, what's just different tones, different focuses?
I think the Costner movie, it's very languid. I think it's 3 hours, and it's 2 hours and change before we get the gunfight at the corral. Right. And I'm kind of like, there's pieces in it that I like. I actually, and I like Kevin Costner, that I just don't think he's good in the role. And part of it is I was going into that with this in my mind. I'm like, no, this is a more vibrant portrayal of Wyatt Earp, and Kevin Costner's it's kind of a sad sack,
Yeah. Yeah, when you say, I think you said languid for that one. This surprised me because I hadn't seen it in a while, and this one was a bit more rock'em sock'em than I remembered, like in a good way. Like, it's like a rock'em sock'em Western with like solid bro love, like some great one-liners. Like it's kind of that perfect mix of feeling like you're watching something historical, but also watching like a great action film.
Yeah,
like it balances all of that really well. So I can see why it's something that people want to go back to.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing, because as written, this thing was much more expansive.
Mm-hmm.
And so one wonders if they had filmed that script as written, would it be perceived the same way it is today? And I don't know. Because, I mean, the script, like pretty much every actor who signed on is like, this is one of the best things I've ever read.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something I'm really fascinated to read one day, like just the complete original Tombstone script. I'm sure it's out there, right?
Yeah, it must be. But yeah, I did have that thought because I I waited to read about the history of this movie until after I watched it, and I did feel like, oh, this is like not in the same way, even close as something like Napoleon, where I was like, holy cow, this feels like a 4-hour movie, that was whittled down to an inch of its life. But like this, I did feel like, oh, I bet there are things in here, especially with like the actress that comes to town and her relationship with Wyatt. And I could imagine that there are a few more sort of character centered scenes.
Oh, you can imagine that Jason Priestley had a bit more to do.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. And even between the brothers and everything. And I would watch it happily. But I do feel like they, unlike some films that just can't bring something together that then feels like a complete package, this is incredible, especially knowing the history of the making of it, what they were able to, come up with a complete movie. Yeah.
So there's Billy Bob Thornton playing Johnny Tyler at the faro table. And this was a real incident. This actually did happen. This was how the Earps got a percentage of the Oriental. It was exactly this. He just threw this guy out on his ear. Yeah.
Wow. Billy Bob Thornton here is so good. It's just like jackass. Like, you just you like enjoy watching him get pulled up by his collar and thrown out into the street.
It's really, I mean, this scene is comparable to the bit with the horse at the beginning, right? Where, I think Wyatt, through much of the film, he's at a very even keel. Mm-hmm. And so that really makes, when he really just explodes in rage in the third act, that really, it carries extra weight. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we know that there are some like mighty adventures behind him, and now he's just looking to settle down. And you've got that energy for the first half, and then he's forced to unleash the beast.
Well, it's great because it's such separate from the historical Wyatt Earp, who's obviously a much more complicated person than even what we see here. But it's such a great Western movie archetype, which is the reluctant hero, right? Mm-hmm. It's a bit like it's the inverse of William Money in Unforgiven, who he was like a bad guy and he gets pulled back into that life, Right. Wyatt, he's a lawman, right? But he's just like, you know what? Like, I'm retired,
Right.
But the world won't let him retire, So that right there, you're going to do something or just stand there and bleed. That's one of those great quotable lines. This movie is just a Christmas platter of quotable lines.
Right. It really is. But it's funny because you have, sort of the late 80s Schwarzenegger lines, which are sort of crazy, like my friend is dead tired and things like that. And like this is that thing where you still get those like badass lines, but they don't feel as self-conscious or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin Jarre, who this would have been his directing debut. He actually passed away in 2011, but he had written Glory and, talented writer. And I think his approach to the film was, he couldn't separate his art from the artists who had to inhabit his art. Mm. And so he was doing things like, oh, by the way, I love this, how in addition to Johnny Tyler having already been humiliated, there's this additional humiliation where he's not even worthy.
Yeah, they just completely ignore him when he is stomped over to them with a shotgun in his hand. Like, oh, hey, Doc, how's it going? Like,
that's so great.
You still here?
He's like, I'll leave the shotgun.
Yes.
It's so great.
That's like they just pulled his pants down and like leave the shotgun is like kicking him in the butt as he waddles away.
No, but what I love, he tries to hand it to him and he's like, no, I said leave it. He puts it on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, Kevin Jarre, he's shooting everything in a master. He's not getting coverage and things like, because he's coming at it like John Ford and the Searchers and stuff, right? And when you think about it, that's so interesting because, like, well, I mean, filmmaking techniques had changed, and so you had to. This was a kind of an old-fashioned story, but you had to tell it with modern sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's even worse, and you know, actors always say this: never give actors a line reading, right?
Right.
He'd be like, he'd go up to, you know, whoever, Bill Paxton, be like, say it like this. And put your hand here. And in other words, he's envisioned it in such a specific way that he was unable to separate himself from that.
Right.
So everybody's getting pissed off. Everybody's getting frustrated. It's a month in, and no one is happy. The money people aren't happy. And it's like a 3-month shoot.
Yeah. A long time.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And basically everything from that first month was shit canned. I think very, very little of what Kevin Jarre shot made it into the movie.
He did handle the Charlton Heston stuff, though, right?
Yeah, which makes sense because Heston was probably early in the schedule. Get him out, right?
Right.
But yeah, other than that, most of his stuff was rendered unusable. So in other words, they're a month in, the director's fired, and at that point, what do you do, right? Like, I mean, I'm imagining all the money people, I'm imagining the creatives, the director's gone, all the actors are, and you've got this ensemble for the ages.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, Wyatt, what's his name? Kurt Russell. Sorry. Wyatt. He's Wyatt. He's sort of, he becomes the real Wyatt Earp. He's like, we got to pull this posse together and we got to get this movie finished.
Yeah.
Right. And so that when they brought on George P. Cosmatos, he had done Rambo, the second Rambo.
Right.
Which, by the way, the story for that, by Kevin Jarre.
I saw that. That's crazy.
Right. So,
yeah.
Fate had already sort of linked those two back then.
Yeah.
But Stallone recommended Cosmatos to Kurt Russell, and he was recommended as essentially, he'll do what you tell him to do.
Now,
right?
is that like on the sly, no pun intended? Or is it like he's cool, like he can be like a utility director for you, he's okay with that? Or is it more like, just, letting you know, if you want to have it your way and you need a guy who has like a director's chair on set, this is your man?
I think it was basically that last one.
Okay.
Right? Because it's generally understood that First Blood Part 2 was really directed by Sylvester Stallone. So in the sense that the star is like, set up the camera here, do this, get this shot, and then he tells the director to call action, kind of thing,
Right.
And so that was I think Kurt Russell, he said, I don't want it, because the studio asked him to direct it, and he's like, well, I don't want to be the guy. And I think part of it is just like, look, man, I got enough stress, so I'll set it all up and then have somebody just shoot what I tell them to shoot.
Right.
And so Kurt Russell talked about it. I mean, he basically, Kevin Jarre gets fired. He pulls the cast together. He's like, let's all band together. We'll work through this. They're all professionals. They know what they're doing. They know their characters. And he says, look, we got to trim this script down so that we can get it done within the time that we have left to shoot. And so what was, 300 pages, just getting hacked to pieces.
Wow.
But not by anybody, by Kurt Russell, who knows that script. Right. So John Fasano, who was brought in by the studio around the same time as Cosmatos. By the way, Cosmatos was kind of in the mix before Jarre was even fired. Like, I think the studio was already moving towards, we're going to let this guy go. We want to have somebody else in the lineup already. So it wasn't like, he's fired, what do we do? Oh, here's this guy. I think Cosmatos was already going to join the production.
Right. I feel like I read somewhere also that McTiernan was approached, but they were like, you right. get no prep time. And he's like, all right, no, thank you.
He's like, I need 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And they're like, nope.
Yeah. Wild.
There's John Corbett, by the way. He of My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Now,
And Tomas Arana, by the way, this guy who did, he's another Hey That Guy. He's in Gladiator.
Wow.
And just like a million other things.
And this is based on a real event, by the way. Did you read that? About the guy, like part of the traveling show was that someone would pretend to shoot at them or something. Yeah. And in this one, when the guy shoots and it blows up his little juggling pin, and he's like, they got real bullets or whatever. That was actually, that's in some book, like documented that happened. And someone yelled that, like, they've got real bullets. Which makes you think, like, man, like going to the theater. I was sort of waiting in this scene because, again, I didn't remember it super well. I was waiting for Wyatt to be like, "Now settle down," as everyone's like firing their guns off. Either they don't like what they see, or they do like what they see. They're firing their guns. But it's just funny. Everyone's like, "Yep, another night at the theater."
What's funny though is that in a little bit they're like, "Yeehaw!" Boom, 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 and shooting, and I'm like, well, if you're doing that in the theater, where's Fred White? Yeah, like right here. Why isn't he being like, "Hey guys, hand over your guns," right? As opposed to later on when Curly Bill's doing it in the outdoors,
Right.
But Kurt Russell pulls everybody together. He's like, look, we got to get this thing done. And he essentially tells the cast, he's like, look, everybody's roles are going to get smaller, but I'm going to take a hacksaw to my own part, as like a show of trust, basically. Wow. Which is essentially what happened, right? I mean, again, Wyatt becomes largely a reactive figure, no less memorable, because the film was essentially whittled down to the Wyatt and Doc love story, really, at the expense of the Wyatt and Josie love story, I would say.
Yeah. I can't say I entirely tracked with that. Like I it's fine. Actually, I did track with it, but I wouldn't have minded a little bit of an understanding between the current feelings with him and his wife and why they are way they are, and then why he is feeling the way that he is about the actress.
Yeah, I think that in an effort to sort of macho it up a little bit and make it more commercial, the love story was one of the sacrifices that was made.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, you get, like I said, you get enough to see that there's some sort of weirdness between them, and she's become an addict to that medicine.
That's right. And Dana Delaney, by the way, she was the voice of Lois Lane in the 1990s Superman series.
Oh.
And to this day, when I read Superman comics, like I hear Dana Delaney's voice.
Oh, her voice? That's funny.
She's perfect. Like, and look at her; she could have played Lois Lane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, seeing her took me back. Like, was it China Beach? Right? Wasn't that?
Yeah, China. That's right. Yeah,
like a
Marg Helgenberger
sitcom. What are we talking about? It's like a army drama
in
the 80s.
I remember when Bill Paxton, shortly after Bill Paxton died, Conan talked about an experience he had with him where they were attending a screening of some kind, and Bill Paxton happened to be there. And Conan was there with one of his writers. He's like, "Oh, Bill Paxton's there. I'm such a big fan of his, And so Conan went up to Bill Paxton and just mentioned, "Oh, I got one of my writers here. He's a big fan of yours." And Bill Paxton went up to this guy and sat behind him and just started whispering in his ear. And because he had mentioned, he loved him in Tombstone. And Conan said later that he whispered every line that he has in Tombstone.
I love that. He seemed like what you constantly see him playing on screen, just like the guy you wish was like your next door neighbor. Like you have barbecues with the guy and he'd be like, "Hey, Zachy, how the hell are you?" Kind of a guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it hit me really hard when I heard he passed away.
Yeah.
I was just such a fan of his,
Yeah. We going back with Jar and Fasano, right, who came in to rewrite the script a little bit. Apparently there was some arbitration stuff going on, right, about
that's right
credit over the screenplay, and then Fasano was not credited. I think he was early, right, in like trailers and movie posters, but then they had it removed, and so then he was given associate producer credit, so he didn't.
Yeah, but he lost out on a ton of residuals. But I mean, I think that's what we know about the arbitration process is generally people who come in to do rewrites don't end up getting those credits with rare exceptions.
Yeah, they'll go in and they'll literally do percentages. They'll look at the draft that came before and then the current draft and go through and see what was already there, or the bones, or the story, and it's kind of a fascinating process.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the movie that people love, the quotes that people love, I mean, you got to give credit to Kevin Jarre. You know, I think, I mean, it's really interesting when you look at retrospective quotes from the actors, be they, Kurt Russell or Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott, he's just like, the guy didn't know what he was doing, right? I mean, he doesn't mince words.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he wrote a beautiful script, but he didn't know how to direct a movie,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, I think I would wither and die if Sam Elliott was like expressing disappointment in me.
Sorry, bucko. Time for you to hit that dusty trail.
There's like old Bugs Bunny cartoons where like the villain gets like yelled at and then they just turn into a baby.
Yeah.
That would be me.
Yeah. Sam Elliott, by the way, I mentioned on a few episodes ago, I watched Roadhouse for the first time, and I was fascinated to learn that he was my age in that movie, even though he's playing the old mentor.
Funny.
And in this one, he's 48.
Exactly. He wasn't even 50 yet in this.
He's just one of those guys. He just always looked the same age.
Dude, he was one of the regulars on the original Mission Impossible television series.
What?
Yeah. During the later seasons, like 5, 6, 7, thereabouts.
I've never watched I should watch them.
You absolutely should, because it's still a great show. It still holds up. But yeah, when you see Sam Elliott, you're like, is that what? Because he doesn't got his stash, right?
Oh yeah. I don't even know if I know what that looked like.
Yeah, so he looks like, he looks like a handsome guy from the early 70s. But then he talks and he's got his like trademark Sam Elliott voice. You're like, oh well, I'll be damned.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, of course, you saw him in 1883, didn't you?
Oh yeah, he's fantastic in that.
Terrific in that movie.
Yep.
So a lot of stuff here definitely got trimmed down in the process. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, there's supposed to be much more of a relationship between Deputy Billy and Mr. Fabian here. It's only hinted at.
Yeah, which I didn't even remember at all, honestly.
Yeah.
Coming back to this, it's just, really, really on the edges.
I mean, it's interesting because I think what you get is enough. Like, I don't think we need a deep dive into that particular story to get the
unless
gist
you're
of it.
doing a mini series or something and you're like fleshing
exactly
out
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, right? So as you're trying to whittle stuff down, you have to figure out, well, what stays and what doesn't. And I think, the instinct to focus in on Wyatt and Doc, I think that was smart, just in terms of being here, 30 years later talking about it. However, the cuts were made in such a way where, like you said, it doesn't feel. Yeah, I think Napoleon's a good comparison. Like, oh, we're just sort of hopscotching over something bigger.
It feels like an incomplete movie, right? And in this one, like, I can sense that there was probably more between certain things, but it still feels like a satisfying, complete movie.
Yeah. And Kurt Russell has talked about it. He's like, look, there's plenty of like footage for Tombstone. It's like he if there were to be an extended director's cut, he could put it together, but he's just like, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I will.
I don't know that it's necessary. It would be an interesting thing for fans, but I don't feel like the movie, like I said, I don't think it's incomplete.
Now, this sort of rivalry between Ringo and Doc, obviously I love it. I love the Latin off that they have.
Yeah.
My reading of history is that Johnny Ringo was like a high school dropout, so I doubt he spoke Latin.
Right.
So the movie version is just a construct, but what a great construct,
It's a fun, interesting way to watch these guys, to be crass, measure dicks.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that they are like opposite. They're like mirror images of each other, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're like, Doc is sort of a rascal. He's just kind of a scoundrel, but he's still on the side of the angels.
Mm-hmm.
But for this or that, he would be Johnny Ringo,
Right. I could just hear his voice watching him.
Right?
Yeah. He's an educated man. It's just like, honestly, one of those performances for the ages. And
I also love Stephen Lang. He's such a weasel.
Yeah. It's so, I didn't even know that was
Law
him.
Dog. I know, seriously. You're like, that's Colonel Quaritch?
I know. I always think about this stuff too when you watch these scenes in movies where people are doing, flipping their guns, spinning them around, doing tricks. And when they do these shots and they show the actor actually doing them, it's like impressive. Like,
yeah.
Because we're supposed to be impressed by the character doing this, but the guy really learned how to do it. That's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is just the perfect answer.
Isn't it great?
To what Ringo's just done.
Well, and it tells us so much about Doc.
Uh-huh.
Like he doesn't even need to challenge Ringo or answer the challenge.
Right. I love everyone's just like, yeah.
I love that Ringo is like, oh shit, okay, I just got showed up.
Yeah.
Like, the look on his face is so perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I love. Yep. Great.
Now the Cowboys, Curly Bill, they were well regarded in town.
Why is that?
That's an important piece of the story. Like right there, Curly Bill's like, drinks on me. Like he was a popular guy, right? And so this wasn't a situation where it's like the town is living in fear of these guys who just go through the town and do whatever they want. It wasn't like that.
It's, now that you bring that up, I know that I had the whole movie colored a certain way because of that opening scene. So anytime I see them, I'm like, ugh. I feel menace and I don't like them. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't know that I was even clocking the town's feelings about them because I just had my own feelings about them.
Yeah, obviously, historically, there was a whole lot of politics and stuff going on. Johnny Bean, who's played by John Tenney, he Wyatt at one time was going to run against him, and they agreed that they came to an agreement where Wyatt wouldn't run against him, and there was all this stuff going on, leading up to the events that we see, or woven throughout the events that we see here. Like Ike Clanton was not, in fact, one of the Cowboys. He was just a friend of the Cowboys. He was close friends with them, and so what happened was that there were some Cowboys who were rustling cattle, and Wyatt wanted to track them down so that it could help him with the campaign. And he went to Ike because he knew that Ike was friends with them. And he's like, tell me who they are. And I won't tell anybody, but I'll give you a portion of the reward. And Ike told him who they were, but they were killed like separately before Wyatt even got to them. But like Ike was carrying this guilt, like, oh, what if the Cowboys find out? And so he had his own separate grudge against Wyatt for that. Like he was like, oh, Wyatt's gonna hold this against me. Right? So obviously the film doesn't get into any of that stuff,
Right. But you could, like, again, going back, if you did a mini series, but I'm not missing it.
Yeah. But I think all of that helps, like in terms of, obviously there is the historical Wyatt Earp and then there's the celluloid Wyatt Earp.
Yeah, and wasn't that something I thought I had read somewhere that like a book had come out at some point called Hell Dorado, Bringing the Law to the Mesquite. And it says he portrayed Earp as a thief, a pimp, a crooked gambler, a murderer, contrary to the image Earp had built around himself. And Earp protested the book until his death. But it said historical investigations have since proven Breckenridge's description of Earp to be accurate.
Well, that is true. I mean, Maddie Blaylock, his common law wife in the film, she was a prostitute. He met her as a prostitute, and he was her pimp.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, And supposedly Josephine Marcus was also a prostitute.
Not an actress?
In addition to being an actress, like not quite as well regarded an actress as depicted in the film, you know.
Interesting.
Not from a particularly wealthy family, which is something the film talks about, you know. You know, and the end narration's like, you know, through thick and thin, they were by each other's sides. Like, yeah, but she slept around and they had issues. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
It's so interesting, right? Because I mean, this is something that normal folks like us are never going to have to worry about, right? Like, how are we portrayed in a movie, you know?
Right.
But, you know, Wyatt Earp died almost 100 years ago.
Sure.
Right? 1929, he died. And the legend, which he curated, he played some part in curating anyway, that is what lives on.
And I mean, obviously that could have happened in books and things like that, but he did live long enough to see motion pictures come into existence, right? So he could, like you say, like curate his image a little bit. He was an advisor on Westerns, moved to Hollywood, you know, at one point, visited silent film sets of John Ford. So that's, you know, you could be like, well, you know, it was more like this. This is what people thought of me. It's kind of convenient when you can do that.
Yeah, and not to say he was a bad guy. I don't know, but he was certainly a complicated guy, like most people are. You know.
Yeah. But you can turn yourself into, you know, your version of, like Mel Gibson's version of William Wallace. You know.
Yes.
You know, just sort of like, exactly. Yeah, you know, print the legend. But I do think that's amazing that he lived that long, and you know, like we think of Wyatt Earp, we're like, yeah, the Old West, but he lived long enough to see movies about the Wild West.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
I mean, that's sort of, I mean, it's like we think of this stuff as so long ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's like when you really think about it, history is not that long.
Right.
American history, certainly.
Yeah. You know, when you say that, there was a thing on Reddit this week, and it comes up every now and then, but it's this clip from a 1950s game show where someone comes out and they have a secret. And so then 3 people play like 20 questions basically to figure out what this person's secret is. And the clip is this very, very old man in 1950. He witnessed Lincoln being shot at Ford's Theater as a 5-year-old boy. And it's amazing to think that guy saw that, lived to see the 1950s television, and my parents were born in the 50s and they're still alive. You know, like just to think that thread, it's not as long relatively as you might think.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these events here, which are, you know, about 150 years ago, I mean, you know, not 150 isn't a ton when you really think about it.
In the grand scheme. I saw there was, in the deleted scenes, there was another scene similar to this, where Wyatt is questioning his wife's
that's right.
Medicine. What is it? What is she taking?
The laudanum.
Yeah, laudanum. And it's like he kind of it's like what's going on here? It's a little more gentle in this, and then there's a second scene that they cut where he's a little more all right. You know, he like holds up all the bottles. But you
that's
get
right.
it. You get it here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the film doesn't do enough to show Wyatt being conflicted. Like she's so terrible almost from the jump that you're kind of like, dude, ditch her. Go, you know,
right.
Go find Lois Lane, do your thing, you know?
Right.
And I think that feels like a missed opportunity to have some sense of like what did they have that is lost now, you know?
You could almost see like a scene with him and his brothers on a porch or something. Like, I don't know what happened. We used to be in love. You know, something like that.
We'll have Kevin Jarre rewrite that, and
I'll take it from here, Kevin. push him with the chair, and I move over to the typewriter. We were in love. By the way, these mustaches are all real, right? That's something I think I read. Because
man, they
Russell
put some work into
that's
that.
one heck of a mustache.
He's got the handlebar on there.
Yeah.
Now, Thomas Hayden Church, we look at him now. We're like, well, this is one of our great actors, Thomas Hayden Church, right?
Yep.
Back then, he was Lowell on Wings.
Right. In this time? That's funny.
Yeah. And this actor, by the way, Robert John Burke, the guy we just saw, he plays Frank McClary. He was RoboCop in the third RoboCop movie, which came out this same year.
Oh.
But yeah, this was Wings was probably in its third or fourth season at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So this incident with Curly Bill, this was a real thing that happened, although it's unclear whether he was in an opium den or if he was just drunk.
Okay.
But he did just start shooting out into nothing.
Scary.
And that's how Fred... Yeah, I know. That's why I'm just like... First, I remember when we talked about Back to the Future Part 3, and I was like, the thing about the West, people got nostalgia for the West because they're mostly white people.
Mm.
Like, I don't think most colored people, whether you're black or brown, be like, man, the Wild West. That would have been great for me to live.
I gotta admit, I have never wanted to live in the West. I think it was terrible. Like, it's just, you get a cold and you die. And you could catch a cold just by trying to go to the bathroom because you got to go to an outhouse in the dead of winter. And then,
if Oregon Trail taught us anything, it's that dysentery is far too common.
It seems miserable. I honestly, a couple times a year, I thank God that I was born in the time that I was, because I was not designed for the medieval times or the Wild West.
Now, Johnny Bean, who's played by John Tenney, he was married at this time to Terry Hatcher.
Oh. She's like on fire at this point, right?
Terry Hatcher. Well, let's see.
Is that yet?
Lois and Clark would have just started, right? Because we just did our 30th anniversary commentary a couple months ago. But even in the movie, Brian, he's dating Lois Lane.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. This is great. This overhead shot and everything, it just really captures like the sort of the dread, the emptiness of the town, but also like the sort of disorientation that he must be feeling. Yep. I just feel like this
he must be feeling.
Sequence is really well shot.
So Fred White is played by an actor, Harry Carey Jr., who was a presence in westerns during their heyday, and I think they put him in there as like a tie to the genre's history. The real Fred White was substantially younger. He was like in his 30s. He was not an old guy, but I think you cast kind of this rotund Santa looking guy.
Yeah.
And it makes it even more sad what happens, right?
Oh, I was like, I know it's coming, and you're just like, oh, just to see this old man, fall back.
And the thing is, though, in real life and as it's staged, it was not done on purpose.
Right.
And you can tell he did not mean to do it.
Yeah.
Now, what I love about what follows here, as Wyatt sort of gets in the middle here, he's on the side of justice.
Mm-hmm.
So you got people here who are like, "Oh, he killed Fred White. Let's hang him." He's like, "Back off." And then the Cowboys are like, "Give him to us." He's like, "Nope, back off."
Yep. Does he say? Yeah. He'll stand trial for it. Yeah. And then apparently, in real life, though, there were no charges filed because White lived long enough to explain that it was an accident.
Yeah. See, exactly.
Yeah.
That's, you have to sort of put history to the side a little bit,
Yeah, the drama's good.
I love this right here, man. One of my favorite lines. Not before I turn your head into a canoe.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Brian, that is good writing. Man.
That is good writing.
Right? Like,
I've never heard that before.
That's what I'm saying. What a great turn of phrase,
Yeah.
You can totally see why these actors signed on, because they got to say real juicy. And right here, I got 2 guns, one for both of you.
Yeah.
You're coming up. He hasn't said it yet. Music lover. That's great.
Yeah.
So Thomas Hayden Church is playing Billy Clanton. He's Ike Clanton's younger brother, which is why Ike has such a visceral reaction, when the gunfight happens, because his younger brother just gets pumped full of holes.
Right. Yeah. And then for people who are not watching along, like you said, where he's like, he's drunk, he's seeing double. And he's like, I got 2 guns, one for each of you. Yeah. That's one of those things they always tell you with screenwriting. They're like, write a character that an actor just could not refuse to play. Like, I've got to play that. And I mean, this movie is filled with that. Like every, all the main characters at least just get so much to say and so much to do. And like, how could you resist?
The other thing is that every actor with a speaking part, or, like a character that has some presence. I mean, they are memorable, even in small roles. I think John Tenney is memorable as Johnny Bean. I think even Terry O'Quinn, who we've talked past, like, you're like, well, by God, that's Terry O'Quinn. We know him. We love Terry O'Quinn,
Yep. I had forgotten he's in this, and he's just one of those guys, I mean, for me, I know it started with The Rocketeer. Whenever I see him, I get happy. But of course, most people now know him as John Locke from Lost.
That's right. Yeah, we were talking about the Kevin Costner version. I watched bits and pieces of that again in the run up to this, and it's always so. I've used this analogy before. It is sort of like the Kelvin timeline version of this movie, where you're like, yeah, that's Michael Madsen is Virgil, and that's
right.
Lyndon Ashby, who is Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat, he plays Morgan. And like Mark Harmon is Johnny Bean.
Oh wow!
Like it's interesting because I think Kevin Costner tried to sort of strong arm studios the way he did with Robin Hood like 2 years earlier, right? The rival Robin Hood movie ended up going straight to video in the US because
right.
So I think he kind of. So I'm assuming he thought something similar would happen here, but Tombstone had that 6-month advantage, and that was the biggest thing working in their favor. And the actors who were making this movie, they said like we weren't worried about that one because that was coming after, and it might have been Kurt Russell's like, well, Kevin Costner should have been worried about ours, right? Like. And I think he was right. I think that's sort of the ironic thing is that his Kevin Costner's strong arm approach when it came to Wyatt Earp and ended up being sort of the first chink in his armor, right? Because you got Wyatt Earp, The War, and Waterworld.
Right.
Really, it's just don't do movies starting with W. That should have been his takeaway. And by the time Waterworld came out, I mean the Costner peak had long passed.
Right. And it was quite a peak. It's funny that there was that really that Costner era, and then that whole 90s thing, Postman and all that stuff. Where he was just in so many stinkers.
It's that's just the cycle of fame, right? They lift you up, and then boy, do they shit on you afterwards.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. And it also goes to show too, I mean, making movies is hard. Like you have to assume like at some point there was something really tantalizing about either the script or the concept or whatever. And you're like, yeah, of course. Like, let's give it millions of dollars. This is a thing. And just somewhere along the way, I mean, it's just a miracle that when movies do come together, first of all, but when they're good, that's even more amazing,
Well, and we're at this time of year where people are putting out their worst of lists of the year. And then you got people who are like, F worst of lists, right?
Yeah.
And I'm definitely in the latter camp because I think generally speaking, with rare exceptions, people don't set out to make a bad movie.
Right.
And they've already taken their hits either at the box office or with critics. So I don't see the value of kicking somebody when they're already down,
Yeah, and I'm like, through my experiences working on movies and TV shows and whatever, you like also get to see that a lot of times the things that people don't like about your project, it's like, well, you're like, oh, the writer, he really sucks. I can't believe he wrote a script so bad. It's like, well, he didn't, but some studio guy didn't like, doesn't like apples. And so he took out a whole scene about the apple orchard. It's like just these weird things that happen that no one knows about that can like really affect an entire project overall. I'm like loath to do that, to kick something when it's down, because you just don't know how it got there. You can still be like, hey, this didn't come together.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking for myself, I'll be like, look, that didn't work. However, I'm not going to kick these people when it's down because I don't know the story of how it got to where it didn't work.
Well, that's exactly it. And I certainly that applies to Wyatt Earp, which I know it has its fans, that film, even to this day. And I think there's parts of it that are very well done. I just think on balance, it's just, it was a misguided approach, especially contrasted with this, which came so recently before it,
Yeah.
But I think if nothing else, it feels sort of comical now, this idea you're going to have dueling Wyatt Earp movies, right?
Yeah.
I do love this. I think we talked past it where Wyatt is so mad at Virgil. He tells Morgan, talk to him, will you? Or hit him. Again, it's such a quotable movie.
But yeah, I can understand his frustration. Actually, I can understand both sides of this.
Yep. I was about to say, I think this is such a great tableau we're seeing here because you don't know which side you're on, really.
Yeah. Because I understand Wyatt being like, hey, I've done this. This is my time now to rest. I can appreciate that. But then you can also appreciate the sense of justice that the Earp brothers are feeling like, well, someone's got to do something, and we feel compelled.
Well, and I think the central idea of Wyatt having been there is trying to tell Morgan, look, once you take somebody's life, that's a Rubicon that you've crossed. You don't get to go back.
Right.
And I think, when you think about it, right, like the Wyatt as depicted up to this point in the film is somebody who's carrying the weight of the life he's lived.
Right.
And it's not explicated in dialogue. You just see it in Kurt Russell's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when we get to that moment where he's telling Morgan, boy, you don't ever want to know what that's like.
Right.
Like you believe it because you're like, he's living with it. And there's that great line earlier where he's like, well, I've never seen a rich man who didn't have a guilty conscience. He's like, well, I've already got the guilty conscience. Might as well have the money too. Right. I mean, that's all you need. Right.
Yeah. And I do love when movies, point that out. Like sometimes movies, it's like a character will kill like 8 guys and then he like sits down and has breakfast, it's nice when it's like, especially I guess in this case where you're portraying a real person, being like, no, this has affected the person and this is why they're making the decisions they are. Taking a life has weight.
That's right. I will not be pawed at, Brian. That's another line I love.
Yeah.
I think that the morality of killing in the Old West is something that was really being interrogated at this time, right? Because you had Dances with Wolves a couple of years earlier, you had Unforgiven, obviously the year before this, and then this, and kind of, there was this brief like mini renaissance for Westerns.
Yeah.
But they weren't doing those same old kind of stories, right? Even Young Guns to some extent, in 1989.
Yeah, I've never seen Young Guns.
I like Young Guns, that's, I mean, it's not this, but
right, sure.
But I like it.
Yeah.
So Doc Holliday's girlfriend, Kate, played by Joanna Pacula, the real Kate, she was called Big Nose Kate, which seems kind of hurtful to me. I don't know.
Not very nice.
But I'm assuming Joanna does not look like the real Kate did.
Sure.
But the real Kate was very devoted to Doc all the way up until he died.
Wow. You sense that there's like a real connection with them there. It's like it's not explicit, but it's even just in the performances you can tell there's a bond.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's enough. I think, again, we talked about it before, but with Josephine, other than Wyatt being finding her attractive, which of course, because she's Dana Delaney, I would have liked a little more about what it is she's offering that other than sort of, a fantasy, right? Oh, I want room service or whatever,
I completely agree. I kind of, like you say, you get the shorthand of, well, his wife is now sort of like to the extreme at a distance because of her addiction.
That's right.
But I would, like you said, I'd like a little more context of how it began for them, how it got where it is, how they're both feeling. And then maybe I would understand the Josephine thing a little bit more than just like a temptation. Because it doesn't. It seems more than a temptation. They were together for the rest of their lives after this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, it was his relationship with Josephine that ended up causing a break in Wyatt and Doc's friendship, because she was Jewish, Josephine, and Doc called Wyatt like, "Oh, what are you, like a Jew boy now," or something like that, like in a derogatory sense, right?
Jeez.
And that caused a break in their friendship, which pretty much lasted until his death.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah. This right there, this always cracks me up. He just pistol whips him.
Yeah.
It's so funny because Stephen Lang, this is definitely the first time I saw him, but I didn't know him by name. The first time I became aware of him, he was the one-armed man in the Fugitive remake, with
the TV
Tim
show.
Daly. That's right. And then of course now we know him from the Avatar films, and he's such a weasel in this. It just cracks me up,
Mm-hmm. It's so different than that towering badass. Yeah,
exactly.
Avatar films. Yeah,
Yeah, so that guy Frank McClory, that's Robert John Burke. He's in Black Klansman, he's the lieutenant. Who he's John David Washington's boss, but he at this year he was in the RoboCop suit.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah,
and he got the gig just because he fit in Peter Weller's suit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, basically.
Oh man, just the everything in the frame of this movie is just so.
Yeah, and most of this is Kurt Russell's shot lists,
Yeah, so that was did you get into that earlier? Like that was sort of how he directed, like he came up with a shot list the night before and then handed it off and was like,
yeah, well, so when they brought on Cosmatos, it was at Kurt Russell's behest. And he essentially told Cosmatos, "You're going to shoot what I tell you to shoot."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the deal. You don't say no.
Right.
And it was literally like actors who were on set talked about it, that they'd shoot and then Cosmatos would call cut. He'd be like, "Okay, print it." And then Kurt Russell would be like, "No, let's do one more." And he'd be like, "Okay, one more." And then the reverse, Cosmatos would be like, "Okay, one more." And Kurt Russell's like, "No, we got it."
Wow. Yeah, and all the actors like testify to this, right? But they didn't speak about it until Cosmatos passed, right?
Yeah, and Kurt Russell even now is not. He's kind of like and I know without me saying it, kind of.
Right.
But Val Kilmer said it in his book. He's like, well, Kurt and I might differ about details, but Kurt is the one who directed the movie.
And he should direct more.
Well, that's the thing. I find it interesting that Kurt Russell has never directed a movie, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah,
and I can understand that instinct, right? And because I think there's a difference between having a heavy say versus being the guy who has to call action, call cut,
right? And
I think being the star of the show, that's a hard enough thing to have to carry with you.
Totally.
Because Kurt Russell said he's like, I was spending 20 hours a day working on Tombstone, completely separate from my own part.
Wow.
So trimming the script, like, him, Val Kilmer, John Fasano, I'm assuming, just going through trimming, taking Kevin Jarre's script and trying to figure out how to boil down, right? Like they had situations where, like, let's say Bill Paxton has 4 scenes and they realize, well, we can't do the 4th scene because of schedule and everything else. So they would have to go to Bill Paxton and be like, what do you like in this scene so that we can find a way to put it into the other scenes?
Right.
You know?
Oh, man.
Because out of a 3-month shoot, you've lost 1 month, but you still got, you've only got 2. You can't get more time.
Right.
You know?
Man, what a nightmare. Was he involved in the editing process, like post-production?
He was, yeah. Him and Kilmer, both.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it makes sense because, again, it really did become more of a two-hander than I think the other actors signed on for. That being said, you know, we're about to come up on the gunfight sequence, and hey, you know, the poster of this movie is from that. You know, it's those 4 actors walking towards camera, so that's something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's so iconic. I mean, I think about that when I'm walking with a group of people in a line down the street. I think it's Tombstone. You know?
Yeah. The thing is, though, I mean, Sam Elliott said this. He's like, if they had given me the script of the movie that we shot, I would not have agreed to do the movie.
Wow. Doesn't that make you want to read the original script?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because to me, I mean, there's no doubt. I think Bill Paxton and Sam Elliott are fantastic in this movie. Right. So even feeling dissatisfaction, I don't know about Bill Paxton, but certainly Sam Elliott expressed some I think at this point he's probably like, well, all's well that ends well, right?
Yeah.
But
you can imagine a scene where it's just the 2 of them and be like, we can do this without Wyatt. You know, if he isn't going to help us, like, we've got to do it. You know, like something that's really about where their motivations and their relationships, and you just don't get. You just get scenes like this, right? Where it's,
by the way, this right here, another great Doc line. I love this. There's so much meaning. That is a hell of a thing for you to say to me.
He's
right,
such
like
a loyal friend.
Right, and we don't need to know all. We don't need to see how they met. Everything we need to know is in that line and Kilmer's delivery of that line. Right?
Yep.
So this all is largely accurate. The way the gunfight is depicted, the fact that they swapped, Doc took the shotgun, that all really happened. Even down to as they're walking up here, we see the house burning right there. The house burning in the background. That was a real thing. That happened to be happening at that moment.
Huh.
Right. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? Like, that's just a historical detail that had no bearing on anything we're seeing, but they made sure to put that in. It makes for a great shot right there.
Yeah, an incredible shot. Yeah.
Right. But they certainly didn't need to do that.
Yeah. Like they're stepping out of hell or something to like. Yeah.
So the question that is still to this day, 140 years later, what caused the gunfight to erupt? Were the Earps right to go there? Like, I mean, these are still unanswered questions.
Right?
Because they're going over there ostensibly to disarm the Clantons and Billy Claiborne or whatever. But Bean, he went up to them right there. He said, no, I've already disarmed them. Right? So if they were only going over to disarm them, they could have just been like, okay, and then they could have avoided the fight, right?
Sure.
Now, of course, they were not disarmed. So Bean lied, but still.
Yeah. So it's like, the motivations, right? Like, was it just ramped up frustration, or was it like
were the Earps going to kill the Clantons?
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I should mention, right in the back, Billy Claiborne in the blue, he's played by Wyatt Earp III. Who
really?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, he is the grandnephew of Wyatt Earp's half brother, Neil Earp, I believe his name is.
Wow, how amazing!
Right.
You know, like this happened and it's so intense and iconic. And then just to be a part of that, you know, the depiction of it. That's amazing.
That's right.
I could just sense it, even with the sound off, the tension.
Yep.
You know, the close-ups on all his face, and then him, Doc winking.
Well, and I love why it's like, oh my, like he knows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinary to think that this is 30 seconds of American history that have lived on forever and ever and ever.
Become a thing of legend.
So this here with Ike, where he says, I'm unarmed, and Wyatt says, the fight's commenced, get out of the way. That really happened. Right? So my point is, if the Earps were just going over to kill them, well, he could have shot Ike Clanton right there.
Sure. Right.
But he didn't. He says, you're unarmed, get out of the way, right?
Right.
So it's complicated. That's my point.
Yeah.
In fact, what's untrue is that Ike started firing. Like this part right here. That didn't happen. He ran away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's made up for the movie right there.
Huh.
And I don't know why they did that, to be honest. I wish they wouldn't have.
Yeah. It looks cool.
You know? Yeah, but
busting through the guys. I mean, no. I'm on your side. I would rather. Why not stick with history, because it's already exciting enough. But yeah. So
historically, that's what right there where he's running away. That's all that happened. He didn't open fire on them.
Right. And then the way that he's busted into that photo shoot, right, with the with Josephine, that's based on an actual picture, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but not her. Is that?
It was not her. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the gunfight did not involve, like I said, the other two brothers. So James Earp was not a lawman. He ran a saloon in town, and the younger brother was not at this point. You know, again, he joined the Vendetta ride later. So I think that was the calculus behind, well, let's narrow the focus into the people who were actually involved in the shootout. Now, this is a historic moment where Johnny Bean tried to arrest him, and Wyatt said, no, we're not going to let you arrest us today.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, I mean, we're on the side of Kurt Russell. Right. But like in real life, it's like, maybe we talk about this, what just happened here, and we sort this out.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Because this moment divided the town. It was not, like I said before, I mean, the Cowboys were not hated in town.
Right.
And so there were plenty of people who felt that the Earps were wrong to instigate this.
Right.
There were two newspapers in Tombstone, and one took the side of defending the Cowboys, and one took the side of saying, no, the Earps were right. So it was not clean cut. It's also, the way Kurt Russell strolls up to John Tenney, he's just like, we're not going to let you arrest us today. And his line reading, and then the Kevin Costner version, it's sort of more Kevin Costner-y. The way he says it. And it doesn't have.
I hear that.
We're not going to let you arrest us, Johnny. It's like that,
Not today. Yeah.
I love Kevin Costner, but
Oh, yeah. He's fun to impersonate.
But this moment right here, right, just that we just saw, where he tells the mayor, like, "Oh, looks like we did our good deed," and the Terry Quinn just has this look on his face, like he's like shaking his head,
Right.
He didn't want this either. So I like that the movie drills down on the fact that this was not a heroic moment. It was a complicated moment. Was it necessary? Maybe. But guess what? Every tragedy that was visited on the Earps flowed out of the gunfight.
Right.
So maybe the better part of, maybe as depicted in the film, maybe Wyatt was right. Just let him sleep it off.
Right.
Just let it go,
But yeah, having not watched this movie in a long time, I'd kind of forgotten about this, like them having to observe this funeral and yeah. it didn't feel like a victory, like you said. It's complicated.
First time I ever heard about the gunfight at the OK Corral was thanks to an episode of the original Star Trek. Where there's essentially this alien being takes, Kirk and Spock and McCoy and Chekhov, whoever, and ends up dropping them into this moment, but they are the Clantons.
Oh,
so it's like, oh, they're destined to have this showdown with the Earps, and they're destined to die, and they have to figure out how to get out of it. So that was the first time I ever heard of. I read a novelization of that episode, which is the episode is called Spectre of the Gun, but the novelization is called The Last Gunfight. So I remember watching Tombstone, and being like, oh, this is this is what I just know it from that Star Trek.
That's so funny. Wait, so who's Jason Priestley playing? Like, who's he in the town?
So he's a deputy.
Okay.
But again, he works with Johnny Bean, who has, a good relationship with the Cowboys, right? So, I was going to say sister boy. That's what they call him. He's Billy Breckenridge. He's obviously gay. But I kind of like that the movie doesn't need to hit you over the head with it.
No, it's
just texture. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a real person, and a lot of, especially what's depicted later. I don't think there was a Mr. Fabian. I don't think that was a real person.
That's Billy Zane.
That's Billy Zane's character, right?
Is this all the actress, like in the timeline and all that, Josephine, like, is that all correlated here or portrayed accurately?
I believe that Josephine left Tombstone earlier than is depicted in this film. Like in the movie, it's, Fabian is killed and she's like, this is all ugly and horrible, and she leaves. And I don't think that was the cause behind it. But I mean, what's accurate is that she and Wyatt did not have a relationship when they were in Tombstone. I think there was that flirtation and sort of, but I mean, Wyatt was loyal to Maddie up to a point. But when he left, like, because she wanted a divorce and he didn't want to give a divorce. So he went off. He went away, but he was, and she did die of a drug overdose. That's accurate.
I read that all this lightning was real. I couldn't believe it.
The lightning was real. The rain wasn't.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, crazy.
Watching the movie, I was like, well, that looks like real lightning, and sure enough,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that. I don't know how much of the framing comes from Kurt Russell versus George Cosmatos. And I tend to credit the finished film to both of them, because I think, maybe he was just shooting what Kurt Russell told him to shoot, but he got the shots.
Yeah.
And I think what they were able to cut together was effective based on that. Was the other problem that they were having with Kevin Jarre, is he was shooting footage that they couldn't edit because it didn't flow together,
Right. And you were saying,
and this is
coverage.
Stuff,
yeah,
no cover, exactly right. And this is stuff definitely like it feels like very first time director problems, right? So then you kind of say like, well, I mean, why would they risk giving such a high profile production to somebody who's that inexperienced?
Yeah.
And obviously they're both dead now, George Cosmatos and Kevin Jarre. But I mean, again, this is just from people who are on the set. They're like, he wasn't listening. Kevin Jarre, he wasn't listening to the cinematographer who's like, you got to do this, and
right.
Or the editor saying, look, you need to get me this type of coverage or whatever. So that's a kind of a miserable situation to find yourself in. Especially the other thing is when you talk about like, oh, you're giving your actors line readings. Well, then they're not giving their truest performance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this incident here with the wives being attacked, that's just made up for the movie. That didn't happen.
Oh, really? I was wondering.
That did not happen.
You know, it's so funny. It's so specific with the woman and the tarot cards and all that I assumed that must be some sort of known fact or something to recreate like an actual historical moment. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, the movie. I mean, obviously they want to ramp up the idea that now that this has happened, the Earps are under siege, but there's no record of anything like that having happened to the wives. The other thing is that what happened to Virgil and what happened to Morgan was separated by about 3 months. Right. So the movie, I mean, essentially you had the gunfight was in like October.
Mm-hmm.
Virgil, this right here, this was like December. So it's about 2 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened to Morgan was in March.
Wow. Well, I could see it in terms of movie logic, you know.
I think so.
Compressing.
And I mean, when you think about it, you know, because we have this. Oh, and this is real, by the way, where after he's told he had to lose his arm, he said, "Well, I still have one good arm to hold you with." He actually said that.
That's incredible. Actually, that really put a little lump in my throat.
Now, what's interesting is
sorry.
Real quick, I mean, they put Virgil and Morgan, they put that attack on the same night in this movie. They also did that in Wyatt Earp, in the Kevin Costner one. Even though, again, it's separated by 3 months. But in that film, they inverted it. So Morgan gets shot and then Virgil gets shot. But again, it happens on the same night in that movie.
Well, I guess the storytelling instincts were correct.
There's something in the water.
Yeah. It makes me want to watch that, by the way, because I don't remember it at all, or if I've even seen it, Wyatt Earp. But now, having watched this twice, essentially, I'm kind of curious to see, like you say, the Kelvin timeline version of this story.
I mean, you know, I don't. It's too well made to be terrible. I just don't think it's as good as this one.
Right. No, I was just going to say earlier, it's amazing. In all the trivia I read about this and the things that you're saying, how many of these lines in the movie are actually reported that these characters said them, you know, like like down to Doc's, you know, "You're a daisy if you do."
Mm-hmm.
That was like reported in a paper that was his response. You know? And it's just, and then I still have one arm to hold you. Like it's, you do think like if it's like you said, it's not going to happen, but if a movie was made of our lives, you're like, no one's recording this stuff.
That's right.
All our brilliant one-liners. I say, jokingly, but it's just amazing that so much of this is recorded, and then you put it in here, and then when you find out it's true, you're like, wow, this is pretty iconic stuff. It's cool they actually had it to draw from.
Yeah, absolutely. See, the thing here, I like the bit there where McMaster's joins. I think that's a great moment. But here, where you've got Morgan playing billiards, and this is what happened historically. But if you place it on the same night as what happened to Virgil, it doesn't make sense. Because he just stormed off. He's like, "We got to go after them, Wyatt. Come on!" And that's what he's all mad about. And then he's like, "I'm going to go play pool now."
Yeah. Right? Well, good point. Good point.
Because if they feel that they're under siege, you know, that same night he wouldn't be playing pool. He'd be somewhere not in front of a
barricade somewhere and come up with a plan. Yeah. Yeah, good point.
So originally this scene was a little bit longer as written. There was more to it, but I'm like, well, we get everything we need out of it.
Yeah.
I think Kurt Russell, really in this scene, we see the facade, the you know, he's an oak, right? Like the oak starts to crumble.
Yeah.
I think it's terrific. I mean, it's, you know, we talk about a reactive performance. Well, I mean, Bill Paxton is giving Kurt Russell exactly what he needs to just this lovely moment. It's so sad, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, this is one of those tropes where early in the he's like, "What do you think happens when you die?" I'm like, "Man, if you're in a movie, never ask what happens when you die." You know?
Right. Especially with like an optimistic spirit, like, yeah, I've been thinking lately, what happens when you die?
Yeah, never goes well,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's just look at Russell's face.
I know.
When we cut to him, I mean, it's just, and again, that music that we heard at the beginning that comes in here, but now it's like tinged with tragedy,
watching his face and Kurt Russell, like, you feel like he's one of those guys, and I think everyone would go, "Oh yeah, Kurt Russell," but it's kind of amazing that we don't see him or celebrate him more than we do.
I absolutely agree. But I think I'm like, talk about the exact kind of Hollywood career you want.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? You know what I mean? Where it's like you're not soaring so high that people are gunning for you.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right? I mean, for 60 plus years, he's been acting.
Yeah, I mean, he was a child actor acting with Elvis at one point.
Yeah. First time I ever saw him was one of those Disney teen movies. Oh, real quick here, by the way. So originally, as filmed, he doesn't say "get away." He calls her a Jew whore.
No.
Yes. And that's why she reacts that way. And I'm like, well, obviously you should not. Yeah, they made the right choice there.
Wait, that was what was filmed?
That was filmed. As filmed, he says, "Get away from me, you Jew whore."
Holy cow. Like, well, and nothing in this movie
doesn't even make sense in the context.
No, I was going to say, like, I don't understand why he would even say that. I mean, for obvious reasons, but also within the story. Wow.
Like, maybe Wyatt did say that at some point,
Maybe, yeah. Well, sure. I mean, yeah.
But I mean, when you look at her reaction, the way has this like, right?
Yeah. When he just tells her to get away.
It's not because he's saying "get away." It's because he's calling her something awful.
Wow.
Right. So maybe it's because like Kurt Russell really got into it. Maybe it's as written, but I just love like you imagine them sitting, him and Val or whoever, they're sitting watching the movie Ola, and they're like, "Yeah, maybe we should ADR that."
Right.
I mean, that's why she's so pissed at him right now.
Well, and that was the moment where I did think about it, where I just want a lot more context all around with this love triangle.
Yeah.
Like, where are they at in that moment, Yeah. Like, did he have a conversation where, like, I would love to go for a stroll with you through town, but it's just something I can't do, And then in that moment, she wants to be there for him, but he rebukes her because, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, what I was saying about Kurt Russell, first time I ever saw him was in a movie called Strongest Man in the World. And it was like one of those Disney teeny bopper movies.
Yeah, like the computer who wore tennis shoes kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that was like his franchise because he played the same guy in like 3 movies. But of course, the first time I really became aware of him was in the ads for Big Trouble in Little China, which I didn't see until like years later. But
yeah, I remember that too as a kid.
Yep. By the way, we have not talked at all really about Powers Booth.
Oh man, yeah.
Who like that right there? Well, bye. That's like this meme that will never go away, right? It's an eternal. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and it's just this whole moment, like them leaving town with their dead brothers, and then them just sitting on a porch. See ya. It's just so. It just runs a chill down my spine.
Powers Booth is really good in this, and he's just a presence. Again, Ringo and Curly Bill, they had a lot more to do in the script as written, but in the movie as it exists, I mean, they do what's needed, where they provide this presence. And Curly Bill, I think what's so brilliant is he's just this side of sinister, where you don't quite know how he's gonna, is he gonna be friendly or not, And I think that's what really works. So this actually did happen where Wyatt and Doc, they took Virgil to the train station, and these guys were waiting for them. Great moment here, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, historically, what happened was not so much the way we saw it, but Wyatt shows up, Ike takes off. So Wyatt doesn't let him go. He just gets away. And Frank Stillwell was there. And he says, fine, I surrender. Because Wyatt says he's a marshal. He says, Stillwell surrenders. And Wyatt shoots him in cold blood. And so you can understand why the movie chose to go this way. But I mean, Wyatt, after Morgan's death, he went to a dark place. And so that's the Vendetta ride is, it's uncomfortable. I don't think the movie even is really meaning us to view it as like a raw thing. Like, oh, go get those guys. I mean, he's doing stuff that is questionable. But this is a great moment, man. I mean, the music kind of crescendos, See, look at how he's framed in the shot, and look at how Michael Biehn is framed earlier in the movie.
Yeah, gorgeous.
So Bruce Broughton, who did the music, I love this score so much.
Oh man, yeah, so good.
I listen to it all the time, and what's interesting is he was a ringer because Jerry Goldsmith was supposed to do the score for this. Which makes sense because George Cosmatos, worked with him previously on Rambo, right? He did the score for Rambo. Right. And the thing about that, I'm like, I mean, I love Jerry Goldsmith. How can you not love Jerry Goldsmith, right? Rambo, Planet of the Apes, for goodness sake, Star Trek. Right. And yet, I'm like, thank God Jerry Goldsmith didn't do this. Because I know Jerry Goldsmith's 90s music, and it's all fine, but it kind of was, it was in a certain level, right?
Sure.
And I can imagine what the Jerry Goldsmith Tombstone score would likely have sounded like. But Bruce Broughton did something really extraordinary where he came up with these motifs. He's got these great action motifs. This whole sequence here, like I can hear the music. I can hear every note of what we're watching. But like the family theme and the Tombstone theme, everything. Like it's so memorable. And it's a shame because he hasn't done a ton of movie music, but whenever he does a score, I always enjoy it. He did the score for Lost in Space, which the movie's a piece of shit, but it's got a great score.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not missing anything. It's got a good score though.
Yeah.
Now, based on this sequence, you'd think that the Earp posse was just riding across the Wild West, dispensing death everywhere they went. In actuality, there's only about 4 people who were killed during the Vendetta ride, including Curly Bill. So, the movie kind of amps up the stakes a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and then I guess without cars, it was a little more dramatic to get from place to place. So you get these amazing shots of them, riding against sunsets.
That's right. The beautiful shots, though. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. But it is funny that one shot where he puts the gun in the guy's mouth, and then the camera kind of tilts away, and then he fires. Yep. You're like, ooh, like you're saying. So right. It doesn't get to this point where it's just like, yeah, get him. You're right. A little like, ooh, there's a darkness. There's a darkness here.
Now, by all accounts, this actually happened.
I know. I actually was thinking while I was watching this, like, damn, this is like real 80s movie. Him storming into the creek, bullets, just approaching everyone as they're firing at him, and he doesn't care. He's not getting hit. I was like, oh, okay. Like 80s movie kind of sense.
Yeah.
But I couldn't believe it. I read that this actually happened. Sorry, I totally intercepted.
No, I mean, that's amazing to me,
Yeah, like feet away.
If there's one thing I would change, it's the slow motion. No,
right.
That's one thing I would change about this movie.
And just have it. I mean, obviously, right? Because it maybe feels a little cheesy, but
yeah, a little hokey.
Yeah.
I tend to, I tend not to like random slow motion in movies. I find it sort of an affect that's distracting.
Yeah.
I love this. Where is he now? Out by the creek, walking on water.
Yeah, that's what I don't know if I said this or I meant to, or I didn't say it well earlier, but that was a thing. Yeah, not having watched this in a while, where this came out in 1993, I had forgotten just its sort of tone, and you can definitely sense like a little spillover from the sort of 80s machismo sort of whatever you want to call it, tone. The way things are executed a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because Matos did Rambo and he did Cobra, and those movies are very much artifacts of their time, and I think this evokes, so like you said, the machismo of those. Oh, by the way, another great line. I got lots of friends.
Yes,
I don't. It's so minimalist, right? Like,
yep.
It's these little pieces, and that's all you need.
Yep.
And when you think about it, I mean, that's what filmmaking is, right? I mean, it's construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. As you put right, Tom Hanks said, like, to make a good movie, you got to make a good movie 3 times. You have to write it well, film it well, and edit it well.
Right.
And at any step in that process, if it goes off the rails, then you're in trouble, right? And Tombstone, when you think about it, this thing should not have worked.
Yep.
Given everything that happened. You don't fire the director midway through, a third of the way through, and expect it to come out okay, Yep.
And then you have footage, like you're saying in the third step, to edit that's coming from 3 different voices,
Yeah. But I mean, that process of I mean, like this right here, this sequence where we have Fabian dead, I mean, it's the tail end of a sequence that was supposed to be there showing what happens and showing how, some of the cowboys who got away, they encounter them. And so again, these are these choices they have to make. Well, do we need this part? Do we need this part? Does having this part make us need that part? And I think what we see here, that, something happened and Fabian is dead. Like, that's all we need.
Right.
I don't think we need to know the specific whys and wherefores of how that happened.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that Behan deputized Johnny Ringo and the other cowboys, like, that's interesting, right? So in other words, it's these deputies against these deputies, right? So the law, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, justice. Well, the law didn't really mean much back then. Clearly, it's just kind of whoever happened to have a badge.
It's funny. That's the thing. Watching 1883 and 1923 and all these westerns as of late, like, there's just like such a casualness to throwing badges at people. Or like, I need a hand. Here, have a badge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you before that the other Taylor Sheridan series that just started, Lawman, Bass Reeves.
Yes.
With David Oyelowo, which you should really watch. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Probably after Christmas, I'll start that up.
Yeah, but it's kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
So here's Chuck Heston. Now, what's funny, Brian, is you and I have often talked about how Harrison Ford is in his Chuck Heston phase.
Yeah,
Chuck Heston in Tombstone phase of his career. Charlton Heston in this movie, 69 years old.
Wow.
Right? Like, Harrison Ford is 80 plus, so he's got about 14 years on Charlton Heston in this movie.
Wow. Huh. Yeah, and then a year later, right, he turns up for a scene or 2 scenes in True Lies.
That's right.
Kind of doing that whole thing.
At this point, he's firmly the and. In the credits, and God bless him, because that's all he needs. Because we right before we're introduced to Charlton Heston, it's kind of a wide shot, and we hear him on Hooker. You're like, I know that voice.
Yep.
He said, "Damn you all to hell" that one time.
Right. Actually, I was like, Moses.
That too.
And he was in Wayne's World 2 around this time too.
Might have been the same year, right? 90. This is 93, right? Yeah, I believe the same year.
Man, that movie came together fast. Thinking about it, because I know the first one was 92.
Was it 92?
Pretty sure.
Oh wow, yeah, you're
right.
I think early
Terminator 2,
which
came out in 91.
That's wow, damn. You're right. Yeah, because Robert Patrick. Oh wow, shoot. So maybe it was 94 then, Wayne's World 2.
Maybe.
Let me look that up.
I know that one was pretty under the gun, and Mike Myers wasn't very happy about it.
With the second one?
They had to write it so fast. And it does feel like a lot of cobbled together sort of half-baked ideas.
So yeah, Wayne's World 2 was 93, you're right. Wow, 92 and 93, back to back. That feels very... Right, because Ninja Turtles did that also, right?
Oh, I didn't realize those were so close.
Pretty sure it was like 90 and 91.
Wow.
That's never a good thing.
And it's funny, speaking of the Turtles, then the tone changed so much between 1 and 2 as a response to 1. So it's amazing that they had the time to do that.
That's right. Now this here, we were talking about deleted scenes. This is one deleted scene that should have been still in the movie. And it's where you see Sherman McMaster, he goes to talk to Ringo.
Oh yeah.
And that leads into, what happens to him here, because I feel like he's enough of a character where we should kind of see what happened to him, right?
I think so too. Yeah, and he's kind of unrecognizable here.
Yeah. That feels like ADR. It's McMaster's or whatever he said.
Yeah. Yeah, good call, actually. You're right. I didn't think about that.
This was the same year as Cliffhanger, which that was the first time I saw Michael Rooker, was in that.
Oh, funny.
Which that's a movie, man. We should do a commentary for that. I would love to talk through that.
Sure. I mean, that's one I think I've only seen once.
It'd be a fun one for you to revisit, I think.
Yeah, it's a good excuse. I like to cue it up again. Speaking of, I can tangentially relates to Sylvester Stallone, but I was thinking about that movie Daybreak the other day. Do you remember that?
Daylight?
Or Daylight. That's what it is.
Daylight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they're like stuck in a underground tunnel.
Yeah. Rob Cohen.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is that any good, or should I avoid it?
I thought it was fine. I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, that was again, everybody was shitting all over Stallone back then.
Yeah.
And he was trying to mix things up a little bit, but I thought it was a little different because it wasn't like smashy, punchy Stallone,
Yeah.
By the way, this right here, another great turn of phrase where Wyatt, he says, "That's the damnable misery of it."
Yeah.
And I say that a lot, like just randomly.
Yeah.
I don't know why, because I don't have any stress in my life like Wyatt Earp, but what a great, like if you're an actor, you love saying something like, "That's the damnable misery of it."
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. I love, when you're reading books that are a little bit older or watching movies, where, like you say, where they take place in the past and they have just so much more lyrical turns of phrases. It's just, I love it.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
This is a terrific sequence right here, where essentially Doc is Wyatt's conscience. It's like Wyatt's inner monologue, but Doc is giving voice to it. Right. And again, you talk about a reactive performance. What's great is, all the showy stuff goes to Doc, and yet, by virtue of Kurt Russell getting to play off of him, they both end up looking good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This idea of Johnny Ringo being kind of like the end of level boss that Wyatt can't beat. I love that. I just, the fact that Doc is like, no, you can't beat him.
Mm-hmm. What was it? I missed it, but there's that great sort of line where he says about him. Was it like, what's he raging against, or what's he?
Yeah, being born.
Being born. Yeah.
He wants revenge for being born.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, man, Val Kilmer made a meal out of this, you know?
Yeah.
It was based on this performance that he was offered Batman. And that I find sort of fascinating. Like, you know, like, because I wouldn't watch this and be like, oh, he'd be a great Batman. Like,
No.
not to say he wouldn't, but that's not the first thought that would come to my mind, right?
No. Well,
But
I'm thinking about Willem Dafoe now and just how different it would be. Like obviously he'd be great. It'd be a different take though. Like the playfulness, I feel would. Actually, I don't know what Val brought to that. You know, the playfulness of it all. But yeah, I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
I think that when I look at like the comparisons between this one and Wyatt Earp, you know, the one person I just legitimately feel bad for is Dennis Quaid, who plays Doc Holliday in that version. Because that's some bitch. He lost his weight. He he got into it. You know what I mean? And I'm sure he did it with an eye on an Oscar nomination or something. You know, like, I mean, if you look, he is like skinny and he's going method, right? And you got to imagine he makes this movie and then this thing comes out and he's like, son of a bitch.
I know. Yep.
And it's a shame because he's not bad in that movie. I think he's totally fine. He's just not Val Kilmer, you know?
Yeah. Just amazing when those things line up like that, right? Like the volcano movies, the asteroid movies, Wyatt Earp movies.
See, that's the thing though, right? Because like asteroid movies, you kind of see, okay, I guess, although it is weird that they came out like a month apart. But like the like what was in the water that suddenly everybody's trying to do Wyatt Earp, you know?
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm your Huckleberry. Come on. One of the greatest lines. Now it is erroneously thought that it's not I'm your Huckleberry, it's I'm your Hucklebearer.
I was reading about this. Yes.
Yeah. So supposedly a huckle is a thing that you hold on to on a coffin. So I'm your Hucklebearer, like I'm your pallbearer. And Val Kilmer, no less an authority than Val Kilmer, is like, no, it's not that. It's I'm your man. I'm the guy. That's what it means. And so I take Val Kilmer at his word.
Yeah. Which apparently some people think could be a reference to Huckleberry Finn, to Tom Sawyer. Like, I'm your Huckleberry.
Which, like, I mean, maybe, right?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know.
It doesn't make sense to me because Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn are friends, right? So
yeah.
It's just funny to me because by all accounts, Doc Holliday did say, I'm your Huckleberry. And maybe it was just some bullshit thing he said one time, you know?
Yeah.
And he didn't think twice about it.
Right. Or just sounded cool. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you and me hanging out. I'm like, you know, I happen to have, you know, a bowl of cereal, and I was like, I'm your Cocoa Pebble or something like that. And it's like a random thing, and then like hundreds of years later, it's like, what did Zaki Hassan mean when he said Cocoa Pebble?
Well, actually, he was talking about carrying a coffin because
that's
or it's like, Coco Chanel was a brand back then.
I was saying, like he had the shits often, and you know, in that time they called those Cocoa Pebbles. So he was actually saying, I'm a piece of shit because he felt regret, you know.
And then like your whole portrayal is like you being like pale and sweaty and always having to take a dump, you know, and you're like, and if you could go back in time or to the future and be like, what? Like just a complete misinterpretation. No.
Oh no.
So I guess Johnny Ringo did not actually die at the hands of Doc Holliday, right? In real life?
Yeah, it was unknown, although Wyatt Earp at various points in his life said he did it.
Interesting.
So, but his story was kind of a moving target, so we don't know. But yeah, he was found under a tree, dead of a bullet wound, which was attributed to suicide. However, his gun had not been fired, so obviously it was not suicide. But they don't know actually how Johnny Ringo died. Now, I love how we go right into another montage. This movie is like Rocky IV with the montages.
Right.
This is another. I love this. I think it's a great. I think it's a great sequence.
Yeah.
The score. I mean, again, I can just hear the score.
Mm. In my mind, I'm playing "I Need a Hero" or "Holding Out for a Hero," whatever that song.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
I need a hero. Kind of works.
See, I want the supercut. So, yeah. Somebody make that happen, please.
That's a pretty badass trick, hiding behind your horse and then firing below its neck.
I mean, you got to imagine if you're an actor, this is like playtime too, right? Like
seriously,
you get to do some fun stuff.
Yeah, firing a rifle in the back of a horse.
But I mean, going back to what I was saying, like Sam Elliott, who is not in the picture anymore, but one thing people said on the set is he would always eat with the extras and things like that. And even Kurt Russell was like, "You don't have to eat with the extras."
Interesting.
He's like, "No, I want to."
Huh.
Which, like, that's just like nice, right?
Yeah. Just that there's no hierarchy for him. It's like we're a team, a man of the people.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading about how, like, even Kurt Russell, who everyone acknowledged was kind of like the leader of the team, he had kind of his jerk moments. Like, Sam Elliott talked about how, like, this little kid went up to him and asked for an autograph, who was like an extra, and he got real upset about it. He wanted the kid removed from the movie. And Sam Elliott was like, "If you fire him, I will quit."
Wow.
Right, and he was like, The deal is that you leave him and his family alone, and you leave them in the movie.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it you don't like hearing that about Kurt Russell, but it definitely makes you respect Sam Elliott.
Yeah. I mean, I only know his kind of on-screen persona. I don't really know what he's like. So just hearing that, like, it sort of fits with what you think of as his on-screen persona in a way. Just sort of like a man of justice.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Sam Elliott, I feel like his persona has been co-opted by like right-wing memes.
Oh, really?
They'll just take a picture of Sam Elliott, looking at the camera
right.
and be like, "Mexicans shouldn't be in this country," or whatever. Like, and you're like, well, it's unfair for you to make me hear that in Sam Elliott's voice. That's not right.
Yeah, right.
But I see a lot of that, like way too much of that. And everything I know about Sam Elliott, I'm pretty sure he would be friggin' pissed off that that's happening.
Dude, I'd be pissed. I have seen that now that you say that, where it's like some sort of statement that someone wants to make, but they just slap an actor's face on it. So
exactly.
You're sort of attributing it to that person. Yeah.
Right. And it's because it's like Morgan Freeman. Well, you're going to hear his voice.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam Elliott, you're going to hear his voice,
Yeah.
So this is a lovely scene. One of the best scenes in the movie. It did not happen. By this point, Wyatt and Doc had parted ways, are probably because of his slur towards Josephine.
Wow. Okay.
So Wyatt did not, in fact, learn about Doc's passing until 2 months afterwards. So he was not here. Now these springs here, they were like sulfur springs, and he went there under the assumption that breathing those fumes in would actually help his health. It actually had the opposite effect, because if you've got tuberculosis and you're breathing in sulfur, it's probably not good for you. But this is the era when they would bleed you to make you better, right? So they didn't know much.
Yeah.
So this all did actually happen, in that this is where he died. But the whole farewell, which is so lovely. I really the story he tells about his cousin, and then just, where he says, "If you ever cared for me, leave me." I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it goes to what I said. I mean, it's a love story between Wyatt and Doc,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why this is considered such a bro movie, because it's like the friendship between these two guys is like, I think something, and you're like, I would hope to have a friend like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you talk about them ripping
someone who would kill on my behalf, that's what I mean, Brian.
Well, I don't want to go on record here, but I will.
What are you bringing to the table?
Mount up. Let's ride.
Sorry, you were saying, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but just if they did take large chunks of Wyatt's character out of this script, the interplay between these two is so palpable and strong that it feels like maybe there's more than there really is, because it's just it evokes so much, for both of them.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that, live right up to the hilt.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now, apparently Kilmer put ice under himself here in this scene so he would feel chilly and uncomfortable, and sort of a method way of executing this.
Yeah, so normally I hear stuff like that, I'm like, all right. But honestly, I'm like, hey, you know what? Whatever works.
You know what? This one I thought actually kind of made sense. Like, to make him feel uncomfortable. And to have,
Well, and you can't fake the tear that he just shed.
Yeah.
And so whatever he did to evoke that performance, hey,
Yeah. Yeah. They said cut, and they're like, brilliant, Val. And he's like, please remove the ice.
Yeah, apparently that was definitely one of those, like, he got so fully in character that people are like, hey, Val. He's like, Val's not here. I'm Doc Holliday. It's like, right.
Really?
Yeah, that's true.
Was it one of those things? Yeah.
It was, yeah, that's true.
And these were really his final words, right? I'll be damned.
That's what's interesting. Yeah, a nurse who was there said, yeah, and he was looking at his bare feet, saying, "I'll be damned," because he always assumed he'd die with his boots on. That's why that's funny.
Yeah, I'm astonished at how many lines they have on record of these characters actually saying that they were able to incorporate into this movie.
Seriously, right?
And they're great.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's like a wonderful farewell for Doc, It's a perfect place to leave that character,
Yeah. And so apparently when Wyatt Earp died in 1929, he had never even been scratched by a bullet.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like, obviously the legend is what it is. And then the man, the historical record is what it is. And the legend is, pulls from history and fancy and everything else. But, you do wonder, like, how much of a hand did Wyatt Earp himself have in shaping that legend?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just knowing that he, I guess he interacted with John Wayne, I think, right? I thought I had read that somewhere. And it's just amazing to think that could overlap like that. And then, when they go on to tell those, when Westerns were enormous, right, in the early part of the 20th century, it's just so crazy that, he could have literally been an influence on that.
That's right. I love Westerns. I certainly love modern Westerns. And I think Tombstone is a big part of why that is,
Sure.
There's just something about the period and sort of the amorality of the scenario, and then you're presented with characters who have to navigate with and find their own morality. I always find that really interesting, and that's why Dances with Wolves works for me. I love Unforgiven, and even like from the classic era, John Ford, I think The Searchers is terrific,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen High Noon.
No.
That's a really good movie. It stars Gary Cooper, and it's told in real time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's called High Noon because it's, it's like, whatever, at 10:30, the marshal is told, hey, this guy that you put in prison is out of prison. He's coming back to gun you down at high noon. So, this marshal has to try to figure out what to do in the hour, until this guy comes, right?
I'll check that out.
It's terrific. It stars Grace Kelly as the love interest. It's very, very good. But my point is, like, I've always had a soft spot for the genre, and I think Tombstone to me typifies why I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now this all here, I watched this. First of all, I love that you got the great music playing over it, but I'm like, man, they really got some coverage. Clearly, like when they were, they just covered the shit out of it, and they're like, well, we got to do something with this.
It is like kind of an interesting choice, isn't it? I mean, it makes me think of Predator, how it's so unique and random that the end credits have, like basically the end of an 80s sitcom sort of thing, where it's like, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, turn to camera, smile, Carl Weathers, smirk, and so it's like, likewise, like this is such an interesting choice. I don't know that I've ever really seen this before.
Right. Oh, Catherine Hardwicke, by the way. She told plenty of stories about what a piece of shit George Cosmatos was.
Oh, really?
It's really interesting because Michael Biehn also he talked about how he basically said 5 words to him throughout the whole production. One of them was like, "Hi there," and the rest was like, "Kiss my ass" or whatever.
Hey, perfect 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he talked just recently. He talked about how he got George Cosmatos got on set and was very like verbally abusive and yelling at people for no reason and being like, "Oh, I need more extras. Get women with more boobs and things like just really way people shouldn't talk." And yet, like, I mean, even then, you had like Stephen Lang was like, well, he knew how to get a shot, like so. It was kind of this sense of like, well, his being here is a necessary evil in order to get the movie made. And there was always like, well, Kurt Russell is the guy who's really sort of guiding the ship, And
as you point over to Kurt Russell, he's like telling a kid, like, "Now beat it."
Yeah.
You're like, damn. All right, well.
Serious. I mean, I'd like to believe he was just having a bad day and everybody has a bad day, right? But yeah, that does seem kind of like a shitty thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but it's just interesting watching these guys just strut as the credits.
Yep. That's what I'm saying. I mean, clearly this is from the sequence and they just got so much coverage.
Yeah. They're probably in love with it. It just looks it does look very badass.
I mean, certainly when you have that footage intercut with that music, it works its mojo on you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It does the job. And I got to say, this movie does the job every single time. I don't even know how many times I've watched this. And one of my joys as a parent was finally having my kids old enough to be like, okay, now we're going to watch Tombstone.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was their impression? Probably not watching many Westerns.
I think they like it. I hope they do. If nothing else, I hope they're like, well, this is one of Dad's favorite movies.
Sure.
It really is kind of a dad movie.
I was just going to say, this does feel like a dad showing it to his kids movie.
No, they liked it. They definitely did like it, which made me happy. But it's a movie that I didn't see it in the theater, by the way, when it came out. I didn't watch it until it must have been either spring or summer of 95 when it aired on TV on Fox. Because I'm pretty sure the TV promos were like, and Batman's Val Kilmer. So must have been late spring or it must have been summer. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my brother having the DVD. That's kind of my memory of watching this.
So that means you too didn't see it until much after it came out.
I was a little too young. I was 13. So it was. Yeah.
You weren't a big Western person?
Well, no, just like, I was thinking of the theater at least. Like I was too young.
Okay. But what are your thoughts? I mean, revisiting this one now twice in the span of a couple days.
No, I love it. I mean, it really is in that great sort of middle period, exiting the 80s, like we say, where there's like that machismo and stuff, but there's also, it's not going for like the crazy over the top action over anything else. Like it has that sort of heft to it, the heftiness to the action, and like, let's do a shot where everyone looks like hard, but it's coupled with like fantastic performances and like characters that are absolutely people that we are invested in and curious about, and the losses hurt, and it's not like, oh, he's dead, let's get revenge, like you were saying earlier. Like it's more complicated than that, and I feel like it comes in a time where you could have a marriage of those sorts of things. Like now, if this movie were to come out, I think people might think, like some of the more, like I say, 80s heftiness of it might feel a little like out of place because we run things a little more at post Dark Knight. Everything's so grounded, and morose. And I feel like this is just that perfect cocktail that could have only happened in 1993 that makes it so memorable and enjoyable, and you laugh and you enjoy the bromance, like you said, between Doc and Wyatt. And it's just that perfect mixture that comes together to make it this classic, the classic that it is. It couldn't have been like this in any other time, I don't feel.
I think that is so apt what you said. Yeah. I mean, it is such a perfect product of its time. And yet, weirdly, that all of those ingredients that made it a product of its time also made it timeless.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, why we're able to come back to it 30 years later and still find enjoyment in it. It's engaging on just on a performance level, but also, I mean, they constructed a really compelling story that evokes, I think, the best of I would say certainly modern Westerns, but the Western genre. And by the way, you can read the Berkeley book. Remember when movies just always had novelizations?
I had the novelization of Wyatt Earp.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's random.
Yeah. Can't remember if I've seen the movie, but I know I read the book. Probably bought it at a Jewel grocery store and was like,
how funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, the like I said, the Costner Wyatt Earp film, I don't think it's bad, and it has a decent score by James Newton Howard. I don't think it's one of Lawrence Kasdan's best movies. Like, watch, Silverado if you want. I think Silverado is Lawrence Kasdan, right?
Yeah.
If you want a good Kevin Costner Western directed by Lawrence Kasdan, go with that.
Yeah.
But hey, everybody listening, let us know your thoughts. What do you think of Tombstone? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie and your thoughts on our thoughts. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. And with that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been our movie film commentary for Tombstone. Thank you everyone for listening, and Merry Christmas.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love, only at David's Bridal.
When you wake up well-rested on a great mattress, everything becomes clear.
I do have a favorite child.
Things you missed when you were tired finally reveal themselves.
I use memes as a coping mechanism.
It's Mattress Firm's once-a-year sale and clearance. Get up to 60% off select Sealy, plus a free adjustable base, all with free and fast delivery. Deals this big won't last long, so don't miss out. The right mattress matters. We'll find yours. Restrictions apply. See store or website for details.